Okay, so I'm convinced that most of our MPs, conservative, liberal, NDP, or otherwise, are demon possessed, and nowhere is that so obvious as it is when they're asked about abortion. Here's what they said.
I'm here representing the Women's Caucus and members of the Liberal Party, and we've sent a letter to the Leader of the Opposition asking him to be very clear with Canadians, and in particular with Canadian women, on what he would do to defend a woman's right to choose. We've seen that his caucus, there are many anti-choice caucus members. We've seen some of their actions recently, including MP Kathy Wagenthal, who at the pro-life rally held here last week said that women who have abortions end up needing redemption, forgiveness, and needing God. We as women want to know whether the Leader of the Opposition will ensure that his caucus does not put forward legislation that in any way impinges on women's rights and freedoms, in particular bodily autonomy.
Okay, so here are these liberal MPs and liberal bureaucrats talking about how we have to protect a woman's right to choose and how we have to protect and uphold the right to choose at all cost, at all cost. Now, of course, there's a problem with that. There's a serious problem with that, which is every action is a product of choice. Like, if we make choice our standard of right and wrong, which these women and these male bureaucrats have done, if we make choice the standard of right and wrong, then every action becomes not only permissible, but moral. The murderer is as righteous in that case as the woman or the man who loves his or her child. Right? If we make choice the standard of goodness, the standard of right and wrong, and if we say that something is right, something is to be protected because it is a product of choice, then we have to protect murder, we have to protect abortion, they're the same thing, we have to protect someone who's abusing someone, we have to protect all of this evil because all of those actions, as unjust, as wrong as they are a product of choice. So it's not as though we can make choice the standard of right and wrong. In that case, no one's ever guilty of anything. No one would be guilty of anything. Adam and Eve would have never sinned in the garden, right? Moses, no. Well, any man for that matter would have never done a bad action, would have never committed sin, would have never done evil, not once in their entire life, because all of our actions are a product of choice. Thus, to say, well, we have to protect so-and-so because so-and-so derives from the right to choose and it upholds the right to choose is nonsense. It means the entire legal structure of our country disintegrates. It means every prisoner should be let out free, and no one should ever go to jail ever again because no crime could be committed, because all actions would be judged on whether or not they were a product of choice. And because all actions are a product of choice, no crime could be committed, no law could be instituted in the country. And secondly, even though these bureaucrats here are talking about how they uphold the right to choose, they really don't. They don't believe in it at all. We can't, it's not as though you can make choice the standard of right and wrong, because what if someone chooses to not obey that standard? Suppose that there are two people. One says choice is my objective standard of what's evil and what's just, and another man says actually choice is not my standard of what is evil or just. What is the pro-choice activist going to say? Is he going to say, yes, okay, you can walk the other way and choose something else to make your standard of right and wrong? Clearly they don't do that. They're freaking out about it over here. Or is the pro-choice activist going to say, no, you actually don't have a choice in this matter. You have to uphold the right to choose. But if they do that, all of a sudden they eat themselves alive. Their whole worldview comes crashing in upon themselves because they no longer maintain or uphold the right to choose for everyone. Instead, preferring to say, all of you have to follow what we say. None of you have actually the choice to choose something else besides the pro-choice worldview, and so you have to bow to us. That doesn't sound very pro-choice to me.
His office has already said that.
What part is not clear? His office has said that they're not going to use the notwithstanding clause on abortion to regulate abortion. He said he's not going to legislate it, introduce it, pass it. So what part's not clear?
That's his government. There are ways that you can have private members' bill that are introduced as well, and the risk is still there. He voted against Morgentaler back in 2008 as person. I mean, he is in every sense that caucus and that leader has made women wonder about the risk that they're going to be taking with this leader. And I want him to come out and unequivocally say that they do everything to defend a woman's right to choose, that they will not allow their members to come forward with private members' bills and put forward bills that suggest that a fetus is a person.
Right, so there is the heart of the argument. These activists, these demon-possessed individuals don't believe, at least publicly, although I do think they know it, they just refuse to admit it publicly. They say the fetus isn't a human. What is a fetus then? What are we to say it is? When is this individual, this being growing inside a mother's womb, deemed to be human? Is it though we become more human the older we get? What nonsense. It's total absurdity. And we can say, oh, they really believe that the fetus isn't human. Actually, I don't think that. I think they know that a child, is a human child from conception. It's just that they're priests and priestesses of Moloch. They're servants of Moloch, and they worship babies as they sacrifice babies in worship to Moloch and Baal as a sort of sacrifice, a sick sacrifice to remain in power. It's disgusting. It's evil. We like to comment on how wicked old empires were, like Carthage, where they would sacrifice babies to all of these pagan gods and say, "Oh, we're so refined, we're so civilized. We don't do that now." Actually, we do that now. Yes, we do that now. It's just we do it in a different fashion. We do it, and more often for that matter, every day. These leaders here, these bureaucrats here, championing it, protecting it, flying into a fury if they think even for a moment it's threatened.
which is a backdoor way of, again, addressing this issue.
Is it the Harper government had 10 years. I know you weren't here. Many of us were. 10 years in power. They had 4 years as a majority, didn't move one bit. And they had private members who wanted to do things. Guys, you are all 30 points down the polls. I'm looking at some of you will not get reelected if there was an election this fall. This is the most cynical play to just throw the abortion scare tactic. Would you like to respond to that observation?
Absolutely. It's
Please.
not a scare tactic. We've seen what's happened in the States. Do people really think Roe versus Wade would have been overturned? Do we think what was happening there was going to happen? I've been in the women's movement for over 50 years. It is not a scare tactic. Things are going backwards, not only in Canada, but around the world. And these are real risks for Canadians. We need to know very clearly that that party, policies put forth at the convention, individual members are not going to introduce things because we do not want to go the same way as the United States. So it is not a scare tactic. It is a very strong concern. And I may not have been here then, but I was other places working on women's rights, okay? So do not use that as a reason why.
These demon-possessed coyotes and wolves have led us into an abyss, a dark and lamentable abyss with this odious apparatus of death. And now they're scared that perhaps people are saying, wait a second, there's too much death. Something here is wrong. We want to go back to the light. We want to return to righteousness because believe it or not, it actually makes sense for humans to want to live. So these evil bureaucrats, these sick, demented, twisted bureaucrats are scared because they know that they have orders from their demons to do this and to do that, and they're worried that their empire is falling apart, and we know it's going to fall apart because Jesus Christ is coming back.